Hello, how's everyone doing? Hello, hello. Hope you're all doing well. Enjoying the first week of the term for those of you in Animation Mentor. And for those of you who are not, hopefully you're just having a great week and enjoying the long weekend if you get to enjoy that in your area. Hey, A to the J, hello, hello. And Sin, of course. Sin's always in here. We can only assume that she's there somewhere. And Thomasil, how's it going? So, welcome to the stream. So for today's stream, we're going to be doing, I don't want to say something different, but instead of doing animation, I want to do a demo for everyone. Now, this is a requested demo. Someone asked me how to approach creating smears, multiples, or blurs in Maya. And I figured I would take the opportunity here to go over that demo, but as well, especially for those of you who are maybe an earlier class of Animation Mentor or not an Animation Mentor at all and are interested in animation, what exactly is a smear or a motion blur and how to think about it? Because there's one thing to actually create it. That's simple enough. The technical aspect of it, once you learn what the program can do, Maya, Blender, whichever program you use, the technical aspect is easy. But the thought process behind it to make a smear or a multiple or a blur look good and work, that's something that a lot of people don't look into often or don't hear about because not many people talk about that process. And K-Strat, hello, how's it going? So that's going to be the demo for today. Motion blurs, smears, all of that stuff. So as we're going through this demo, if you do have questions or anything like that, definitely let me know. If you want me to take a look at some work, I might not be able to do it right away in the demo because I don't want to have it kind of split up. I'm going to try to stay on topic. We'll see how good I am at it. Just so that if people watch the replay, they don't have to kind of skip around trying to keep the flow going. But definitely do feel free to ask for questions, demo requests, anything like that. If you want me to take a look at work, all of that good stuff. Here's an old thing for both smear script. Oh, nice. Awesome. Yeah, that is a fantastic plugin. And thank you so much for sharing that. I don't know if it works for newer versions of Maya, but I definitely should try it again. So let's just get right into this. So first of all, let's just go over what the heck is a blur, motion, smear, or multiple, all of those things. So basically, all of those are animation terms for recreating what happens in real life when something moves really quick. So for example, if I take my hand here and I do this, there's a blur right there. Oh, thank you, K-Strat. So you can see there's this blur that happens if something moves really quick. And this applies to anything that moves quick. If I do this, suddenly you can't see the details of my face. It's just a blur. And this is basically the fact that the camera, in most cases, or even our eyes, if I look at this in person and I do this, it's the same blur, our eyes cannot keep up with the speed of the motion. So it fills in the blanks and creates this blurred effect. This is the reason why when you look at movement in high-speed cameras, so really, really fast cameras, there is no motion blur. Everything is perfectly crystal clear all the way through. The camera is fast enough to not have to try and interpret motion. Our eyes and normal cameras aren't that fast. So in animation, when we're dealing with drawings, and this comes from the old 2D days, this is where these effects were initially created. When they're doing a drawing, it is just a single drawing. And when you put multiple drawings together, you don't get this same effect here because it is just literally one drawing at a time. So in order to recreate this, animators invented multiples and smears and lines or blurs to simulate this effect, but in different ways and for different situations. So let's just kind of go over some examples of what those are. So this is a website I would highly recommend everyone check out. So let me copy this and then share my desktop. So this is Animation Smears. And this is a fantastic site that just has images of smears from cartoons. Hey, Final Boss, hello! So in here we can see all sorts of different multiples. So you can see a multiple is basically when there's multiple of one thing. This character does not have 6 legs, or technically 7 legs. They are multiples to create the feeling of fast motion. Same thing with this character up here. That's a lot of arms for one character. An episode of SpongeBob. You can see it's just multiples. It literally is the term. Now a smear is similar, and let's see if I can find a good one here. So this is more multiples from Steven Universe. And okay, so this is a little bit of a smear here. So you can see there's this kind of dark line going through. This is lines. So they're not only using multiples, but they're adding these lines which help recreate this effect. There's this kind of like semi-translucent skin tone that you get when I do this, especially like right in the middle there. Well, that's what these lines are recreating, these blurs. So it creates an additional effect along with the multiples. Now let's see if we can find a, there you go, this is a smear. So a smear is when the character is just stretched. Everything is distorted, everything is just smeared to create the illusion of motion. So all of these different effects can help enhance a motion, especially a fast motion. And sorry, I said I wasn't going to get distracted. There's a bee in my house and in my office. I've been trying to get it out all day and it just landed on my light. The poor thing is stuck inside and I want to get it outside. And just walking along my light here. If I duck, it's because a bee is coming straight for my face. I'm not allergic, thankfully, but I still don't want to get stung. I don't want the poor thing to sting me in self-defense and then die for nothing. Needs to get back out to the wild outdoors. These effects all create different feelings, but really the main goal of them is to help reproduce a fast motion that is clear. Now, the reason we want to use these is that without a smear or a blur, oftentimes when we're dealing with very fast motion, what we will end up with is a pop in the animation. So let's go in here and just create a very quick example of some animation without a smear, without a blur, and I'll just do it super quick in 2D. So in this case, I'm just going to take a simple sphere, and let's say it starts off here, and it's going to go, let's see, my hotkeys don't want to work. Interesting. Oh wait, that's why. Wrong layer. There we go. So we've got a sphere here, and it's gonna go over here. Well, if I try to animate this and put a key in the middle, I'm gonna have no way of moving it from this point over here, and let's put the frame number, frame 1, to this point over here on frame 3. There's no way I'm going to get there without a pop. If I put the sphere here on frame 2, well, this ease works great, but then this is a huge gap, a huge lack of information, so the audience's eye will not be able to follow it correctly. The audience's eye is going to be looking over here, and then on the next frame, suddenly has to pop over. And that's not going to happen. Their eye is still going to be over here, or more, to be more precise, about here, because the initial motion has started their eye moving over. But their eye won't be nearly where it should be. This creates a pop. It makes it so that the audience misses out on information. And visually, it looks like something was missing. It looks like there was a literal snap or a pop or a jerk in the animation. We don't want that unless, well, I shouldn't say that. Sometimes we want that effect. For most motions, especially organic motions, we don't want that. We want to be able to lead the audience's eye to a location very clearly. So, in order to do this, we need to apply different effects. So in real life, we have motion blur. So motion blur is pretty much if you have, let's try to do this here. If you have, let's say, a sphere here, and it's going to be going over there, going this way. Well, in the middle, it's just going to be a blur. So you're going to have that, but it's really in the middle just going to be kind of this haze in between. So you go one haze into the next. That's motion blur. And this happens with a lot of films. When you're dealing with CG animation, kind of think Disney, Pixar style, those films have motion blur built in. This means that as a character moves very quickly, they don't really have to smear or distort the character. The computer is just going to add in a blur to it. That's great. But sometimes you're working on a film that is stylized. It's not going to have motion blur, or it's going to be 2D, or the director just wants to give it a specific style, even if there's motion blur involved. So this is where we start going into smears, lines, and multiples. And like I was saying before, smears is very similar to a motion blur, but instead of the computer generating a blur, it is the geometry just being smeared across to create or to bridge the gap. Lines are just that. So if we had, let's say, the other sphere here, so 1, 2, 3, we could add some quick motion lines. You see this a lot in anime and Japanese cartoons. They tend to favor different lines, and there's all sorts. You can do basic lines like this. Sometimes it's the silhouette that kind of comes off like that. So you can really expand all sorts of cool things using these techniques. Really study different lines in especially anime. I find they usually do it really well. So you've got lines, and then you have multiples, which is really just exactly what the name implies. So you'd have 1, 3, and then let's just do number 2 in red here. So 2 would be this. You'd have multiple spheres going through, and you get a connection. That's really what we're doing here, is we're connecting the first drawing to the last drawing, so the audience's eye doesn't just have a big empty gap in between, but has a connected line. This brings the audience's eye cleanly over to the next pose, cleanly over to the next motion, without losing them. So would you choose, so would choosing one over the other based on style? Yes, style or the specific effect you want, because each one of these is going to give a different feeling to that motion. Smears tend to make things look smoother, so smears and motion blur tend to make things feel a little smoother, more fluid, because it really fills in the gap a little bit more. Lines tend to make things look a little faster, because even though you're filling in the gaps, well, you're only filling it in with thin lines. So you're still getting that fast motion. There is still little gaps in there. And then multiples give more of a cartoony comedic feeling a lot of the times. That's why you tend to see them in cartoons more than stylized films. And would you suggest us to put motion blur to our reels? No, I would not recommend that. You can if you want, if you're rendering everything out, but I've never submitted any reel with motion blur in it, simply because it's hiding your animation. If you've got blur all over your film, it's going to be harder for the recruiter to freeze on a frame and go, oh yeah, that's a really nice pose, because everything's going to be blurred out. Recruiters are usually animators, and they don't care about rendering and lighting and all that. They want to see animation. So that's what we want to show them. Hello. Are you going to be on camera? Aw, I thought it was going to land on camera. That bee is just floating around all over the place. Yeah, don't worry about adding motion blur to your reel. It is not necessary at all. Same thing with lighting and rendering and all of that. So, with all of these, Barry from the Bee Movie. Yes, he's come to life. So, with all of these, we have different tools that we can use to apply these effects into our scene. And like I said, they all come in at different times and in different places. They are not universal in the sense of you don't have to add all of them all the time, and you don't. It really is up to you what you want in your scene. So I've got some examples here, and actually let me open up one more example before we go into this one, just to show the difference. So I had, perfect, it's all already here. So I'm just going to be showing some quick clips here from some films. So this is Moana. Awesome Disney film if you haven't watched it, but it is rendered in a more realistic way. So what this means is that there are very rarely any smears or multiples or any extreme effects. What they use is motion blur. So that's what happens in real life. We get motion blur. Nope, sorry. Oh no. I was waving my hand and I hit the bee. I hope I didn't get it angry. Hello. Go. No. Now it's buzzing a little angrier. Ah, bad timing. I'm gonna look back at this video here just to see the reference of my face when I hit that bee. I want to see the fear that came in. I think it's resting on top of the lamp now. I don't want to kill it. I want to put it outside. But in Moana, it is, as many other Disney films, it is rendered in a very realistic way. So when you have these fast motions here, you'll see that we start to lose detail. So for example, in her foot right here, you can barely see that it's a foot shape. It's just this kind of blurry mass here. Same thing here. You can see the foot shape is actually all of this, but that's the actual foot right there. This arm back here, you can see all blurred. Then even her face here, we're losing detail. That is motion blur. That's the rendering engine that is simply blurring the frames so that the motion feels continuous. And it just blurs the fast movements. I don't want the bee to go away though. I want to put sugar, I think, just so it can... I don't want it to get tired out. And I don't want to get further in the house. The door is over there, and if it goes further in, I don't think I'll ever get it out. Unless maybe I put coffee over there, that would be good. That's a good idea. I'll have to do that right after the stream. Maybe chase it over there. So here we have an example of motion blur. A very... I don't want to say generic, but the typical way we connect the frames. Now, this is Coyote Falls. This is a great short done by Warner Brothers. I would highly recommend anyone who's interested in multiples or smears or anything like that, take a look at this. This and Hotel Transylvania. Both of those are fantastic for analyzing this kind of animation. But in here, we've got the coyote here coming down, and reaching for the Roadrunner, and first of all we've got a smear in the Roadrunner's face. You can see here his face starts off normal. He's got a tiny little cranium right there and a big beak. But then as he goes through, his face stretches and then comes down. It smears. And the big reason for this is if they didn't do it, let me erase this and just kind of fill in. So his head's kind of a triangle here, about that size. So if we kept that same size head right there and just follow the tip of the beak about there and then there, you can see how much of a gap there is here. From this pose to this pose, the two head positions barely overlap. I hope that's coming in clearly for everyone. But then afterwards, we have this huge gap between one head position to the next. What the smear is doing is it's bridging that gap. Once again, leading our eye clearly into the next pose, because if we don't have that, the audience's eye could easily go this way, and then their eyes will want to keep going too far possibly, or in the wrong direction. We could lose the audience. By bridging the gap, by smearing the pose, we merge that and we lead the audience's eye in the correct direction. Okay, so we've got that. Well, after that, we've got this awesome multiples of the coyote's arms. Look at that. And then this amazing smear right here, which again, if we didn't have this, and imagine the coyote's face, we'll just do a simple triangle here. If his nose wasn't smeared all this way, his head would be about there, triangle about that size, and then it would be gone. That's a big gap to happen in one frame. Same thing with the arms. If his hands didn't stretch here, let's see, the distance would be about there, we would have this huge gap, and then poof, he'd be gone. You might have the hands a little bit there, maybe. No audience member would be able to read that correctly. It would just, he'd just feel like he poof disappeared out of the scene. By stretching him out, the audience's eye is led up and out of the frame. And then the multiples here. This is a secondary use for multiples. So multiples can be used, like I was showing with the Daffy Duck here, to show a motion, in this case his hand coming down, and we're letting the audience's eye get led from way up top to the bottom. That's one way of doing it. The other thing, the other thing that multiples do is bouncing off my screen now, the poor thing. I don't know if you guys can even see it on camera when it flies by. Aw, the poor thing. I would like to see bees suffering. There's so few of them. Oh, A to the J. Someone had to do it. So the secondary effect that multiples have is that they can show hectic motions very well. Motions that would be too much of a pain. Hey, Yeti Kong, thank you so much for the subscription. Aw, thank you so much. That's awesome. I really appreciate that. Oh no, I forgot. I turned off the music. No, you guys didn't get to hear it. But thank you so much. I wanted to look at the camera, but the bee keeps flying right in front of me. Oh. Hello. Oh, yes. Go that direction. Finally. It's going in the right direction. Yes. It went to the door. Yes. I've been trying to get that bee over there for the last 2 hours before the stream. because I didn't want it bouncing around here and I didn't want to hurt it. But it kept like flying into the rafters and hiding itself. A peace treaty, yeah, I'll have to just get some sort of no man's land where we don't interrupt each other. It takes the sky, I'll take the ground. We'll be fine. Oh yeah, hectic motion. So with multiples, it can really show hectic motion really well. And in this case, we get that very clearly when the coyote is trying to grab their own roadrunner. There's just this, like, it feels like 100 arms all at the same time. It enhances that moment so much more than if you just went 1, 2. You're almost showing like 5 times the amount of animation in one frame, which is fantastic for us as animators because it gives us an extra tool to push our animations to a level that conventionally we couldn't do. And we can push it so much more than live action could ever be, because you can't do this in live action. So it allows us to exaggerate things to a huge degree without losing the audience's attention or without kind of feeling just weird. Now, with all of that said, how do you start thinking about this? Because again, like I was saying before, the technical aspects of how to recreate this in Maya or in 2D, it's easy, you just draw it. The technical aspect of it is you just draw it. In CG, you have to recreate it in Maya or Blender or whatever program you're using. That's not too complicated as long as you know a few quick tips and tricks. But how do we start thinking about this? How do we go through and actually recreate this in a way that works and isn't just random motions, where it's just a ton of arms and then poof, they're gone and the audience won't know what's going on? How do we make it appealing? Well, there's a few different ways of doing it, but one of my favorite ways, just because it's simple, is you're basically recreating a spacing chart. An arc and a spacing chart together in one. So let me let's see if I can clean up my drawings here. I just want to clean up my annotations so we don't have all of these extra things. Let's see, I wonder if I can just duplicate this. Or maybe reopen it. There we go. This is such a great short to analyze, by the way. Okay, cool. So, like I said, if you start thinking about this in terms of spacing and arcs, the effect kind of becomes a lot easier to understand and also to plan out for your own shots. So if you're new to animation or you're not familiar with these terms, arcs are basically the motions that get created when we move. So if I move my hand like this, it's moving in an arc, not just a straight line, but an arcing motion. So we've got arcs through our scene. Now the spacing is how quickly something moves, and a spacing chart is basically a way of thinking about that. So if ever you see old 2D animations, a lot of times on the side they'll have this chart with frame numbers. So let's say frame 100, and then it'll be like frame 110, and they will show the spacing that they want to have happen in that range. So let's say something like this. So multiples, a quick way of creating them is to merge these together and use the spacing chart as a way of placing our multiples. So let me actually draw this over on this animation here to kind of give you a better idea. exactly A to the J. So if you want, if for those of you in AM and want an even deeper look into this and a study of this short, I would definitely recommend checking out the Movie Palooza number 18. I go over a lot of this stuff in there in way more detail. But let's go over this. So if we watch the hand, and I'm just going to track the wrist right here. As it's coming down, you'll notice it's moving in a nice clean arc right through here. And we get this nice spacing going through. Coming through and back down. So let's just go right through there. Okay, so you can see it's this nice arc that just kind of flows down, around, and around like that. Okay, so that's a simple motion. Well, what happens when we start getting into this this multiples? Well, let's just keep tracking this. So far we've got nice clean arcs, and then we're just going to focus on the screen right hand here. We get our first multiple. Well, what they're doing is that they just put 2 frames on 1 frame. So it would be like taking this hand pose here, and then taking this hand pose, and just putting them on the same frame. That spacing is still there, they just put 2 of them together. So when we get here, you've got that same arc that's flowing through up here. Then, now we've got 3. Well, same thing. Now it's coming down this way, and through there. Now we've got another 3. It's coming back up there and back around. And then back up and out. So all it's doing is taking this arc, this motion, and putting multiple frames together. Take care, Noelia. So with this, you can very easily start creating smears that work, because all you're doing is thinking of the spacing just the same way that you would any normal animation. You're just compressing multiple frames onto 1 frame. That's it. And suddenly your smears will work much better. So one last little example here. This is from Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, another great film to analyze for multiples and smears. This is specifically great to analyze for lines, so I'll show that in just a second here. But in this frame, if we watch the spacing of the end of this bat here, right there, you'll notice that the multiple is just pushing that arc right through there, and they're thinking of the spacing. So the bat eases out, goes faster, and then eases in. It's just spacing. And then comes in here. And now even the toothpick. Nice arc right in there, and they're just looking at the spacing. This is really cool, the way the toothpick comes in and then bounces off the camera lens. I never even noticed this until I was scrubbing through this morning, and I saw that. It's just like, that's brilliant. Are these planned in blocking per se, or more of a polish thing? It depends on the animation and the animator. A lot of times these can be blocked. I wouldn't say it's done in the blocking, but more of the blocking plus refining stage. Once you start really dealing with your in-betweens, then you'll be putting in the multiples and smears, just because they're kind of integral to make the shot read if you're doing a very fast action like this. If you wait till the polish phase, it's going to be a little too late. Just in the sense of there's always going to feel like there's that pop until you put it in. It really is dependent. I like to get it in as early as I can, if possible. So let's look for lines. So here we can see the lines. So instead of doing multiples for the bat, you can see the bat is actually here, and then there's these lines that come up as well as a blur right there, right in the back. So they're mixing different elements to create an effect. And now lines, and you can see it especially well in this, like even as the little thumb drive here is spinning, they've got lines going around it. His hand's coming up and they've got lines right through. So this is helping to show that speed, but without having to do multiples or smears or anything. It gives a little bit more clarity and tends to make things feel a little faster because things are still technically popping. The lines are just connecting things a little bit more. So, and then you've got this awesome multiple right there, and then poof, right into the next frame. So, I would definitely recommend framing through films. This is probably one of the best ways of really understanding these. And when you're scrubbing through, don't just go, oh yeah, there's one, and let's find the next one. Try to figure out what they were thinking and how they planned that out. That's going to help make it make more sense. So you can see here, there's even a multiple and a smear. So that's a smear right there. And then there's the actual claw right here, as well as lines. So they're actually using pretty much everything in here. So let's see. I'm doing a sword slash animation for my next shot, so I'm not sure if I'm going to need these concepts or not yet. It depends on how realistic you want to go with. So for example, if you're going for more of a Disney Pixar style, well, in this film, this is Moana, there are no multiples or smears, no matter how fast the action is. So for example, like he throws this very quick action here. You can see it's just motion blur. No multiples, no smears. And in general, unless you're doing a very... Look at that awesome motion right there. Unless you're doing really extreme actions, these elements are not going to be necessary. And unless you're doing a really cartoony shot, they're not going to add to a shot. So it really depends on the style you're going for. Now if you are going for a really cartoony, just trying to go as extreme as possible, then yes, definitely those would add, and you can just add them in wherever you need. And I always confuse myself, which one comes first, ease in or out? So and let's say you've got a motion here, so frame 1 and then frame 10. The motion here, this is the ease out, because you are easing out of the frame. And then this is the ease in over here, because now you are easing in to a frame. And this is one of those concepts that took me forever to memorize, because I always got it backwards. I always thought it was in, then out, because in is first, then out is after. But you're easing out of a frame, and then you're easing into another frame, or key. So out, then in. Or there is really not one first, one after, because in this case, it's going into 10, and then out from 10. So ease in, ease out. It's basically based on the key that you're talking about. So with all of these, we have a bunch of different tools that we can add into our arsenal of animation. So with that, let's actually go into Maya and see how we would actually implement that, because if we don't know how to do it, well, it's not going to help us to know about it. It'll be a cool idea, but can't actually add it in. So let's go over the main different effects here. So motion blur. Motion blur in Maya is done with rendering. So more often than not, as animators, when you're doing your demo reel, this is something that we're not going to use. Even though you can see it in Moana and any Disney film, recruiters don't really want to see motion blur because it hides motion. And let's actually just go back in here and show that right in here. when we're looking at this motion, it's hard to see what's going on here. It's hard to see what's going on there. We can start to lose facial features. So for example, as she's dropping down here, her face isn't quite as clear as right here. Now her face is nice and clear and appealing. When we're watching in a final rendered film that's all lit, that's fine. We're not looking for all these details. A recruiter is. A recruiter wants to see all the details in your shot because that's going to let them know how good you are at polishing. So motion blur, not something we usually want to add in for a demo reel purpose. And even if you look at a lot of professionals' demo reels, sometimes they'll put in the non-rendered shot into their demo reel if they can get a hold of it, because it's not rendered, which means it can show the true animation in it. So we would create that by rendering. So you just go into your render settings in Maya and there you go, there's the autosave. So render settings, and depending on what render you're using, you would just turn on your motion blur settings. So enable that, and then there we go. Additionally, if you're compositing your film in something like Nuke or Premiere or something like that afterwards, you can add motion blur into there. It really depends on what you prefer. So that's motion blur. Now the next thing we've got, let's go over smears. No, actually let's do lines first. We'll kind of ramp up the difficulty. So let's do lines first. Lines are the simplest effect that we can create. So here is an animation I have of a character running, and the middle part here, the legs are moving very, very quickly. So you can see here in just one frame, or let's see, 3 frames I should say, they go from way up here all the way to down there. And we've got this big pop right there, and then an even bigger pop right here. So this is a perfect scene where adding a little bit of some sort of smear or something could work very well. So let's try to add some lines in here. Now there's a lot of different ways we can add lines. Let's bring in my main camera here. So this is my actual shot camera. Let's zoom in here a little bit. So let's say I want to add some lines right in here. The first and the very easiest way to do this is using your grease pencil tool. So that's this icon right down here. You click on that, that'll open up the grease pencil tool. Now on my system, the grease pencil tool crashes all the time. I'm not sure why, it's just something on my system. But I do have the blue pencil plugin, which is very similar. It just allows for a few extra options. But the main functionality is the same. I want to add a little bit of a smear. So the way I can do this is I'm just going to grab the color of, let's say, the pant leg in this case, if I want to add a smear from the pants, and watch the arc that I want to create. So the foot comes over and then down, and I can just make sure I show my grease pencil. Oh, let's see, it's showing up as red here. Let me just double check my layers. And camera 1. There we go. So I can just create these lines and create these quick smears in my shot. So something like that. And just like that, I've got some quick animation lines. And usually when I'm trying to do these, I try to make them very simple, not too much to it. And that's it. I can adjust the size, maybe make a few little thinner lines right in there. And voila. Super quick, super easy. And you can go all out with this if you want. So that's the first one, a grease pencil tool. Quick and easy. Alternatively, if you don't like the effect that the grease pencil tool does, you can take your animation, export it into something like Krita or some sort of drawing program that lets you draw over the video, and then actually draw more professional looking with a good brush right onto the video. And that could give you a really cool effect. So that's number one. But what if we want to create something a little bit more stylistic? Something that kind of has a little bit more, well, let's give an example here. Looking in the Spider-Verse, these really sharp lines right here, or this kind of like cell shaded look. Well, once again, we could export our animation into an outside program and recreate things in there. But if you want to do this in Maya, one very quick, simple way of doing it is simply using simple geometry. So let's say we want to do the same speed line here. So let's bring that back. Layer management, that's what I want. So I want to do these, but with actual, a smear instead. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a polygon here. I'm going to create a polygon plane. So this is just a very simple polygon object. Now by default this comes in with a lot of faces, so I'm just going to go into the inputs right here and set this down to 1 and 1. And I'm going to place this plane pretty much right where I want that smear to be, and let's just get it roughly the size. So something about there. Now this definitely doesn't look very much like a smear, but what I can do is right click on it, and then I'll select vertices, and I'm going to move this and start shaping these vertices. So let's try to bring this up a little bit right there, maybe down a little bit here. Okay, so we've got that. Maybe bring this a little lower so it's not too high. Well, that doesn't look too great either, does it? At this point, all I need to do is add more detail. So let's take this object. I'm going to hold down Shift and right click, and I'm going to hit the Insert Edge Loop tool. You can also find these under the Mesh tools and Edit Mesh right here. I just prefer to find it right in there, is what I'm used to. And I'm just going to click and add in some extra detail. And once I do this, I can start to shape this smear. So let's maybe bring this corner up just a little bit more there, and add a little bit more detail, just a few more edge loops. So something like this, like that, and maybe tighten that up a little bit right there. There we go. Well, that's looking a little bit more like a smear, but it's very rough looking. We can see this is a term, an older term, but it's called nickeling. When we can see the hard edges of something that should be smooth. So we can see this corner, for example, that doesn't look very professional. It doesn't look nice and smooth. If you select the object, all you need to do is hit the 3 key on the keyboard, number 3. That'll smooth it out. And there we go. Now we've got a blur. And let me hide those. Ta-da! Right there. And at this point, all we have to do is 2 things. First, we need to animate this. So I'm just going to key the visibility right here. So on frame 9, it's going to be on. Then go to frame 8, turn that off. And then go to frame 10 and turn that off. So now we get, whew, and then there you go. just a quick little blur or a line. Now, this line is very, very thick that I did here. You could make lots of little ones, but in that case, all I would have to do really is maybe shrink this down a little bit and then duplicate it and boop, and let's kind of do something like that. And there we go. So you can do one big one, a few small ones, whatever you want. And there we go. Now again, this one, let's key that visibility. Like so. And there we go. We've got a little bit of a smear. Or sorry, not a smear, but some lines or a blur. They're kind of interchangeable. You can create blurs with these. Now, the one thing with this is the color isn't quite right, is it? It's just default gray. So one extra step that I would do for this is I would change these to match the color of whatever the line is coming off of. So, for example, in this, you'll notice that you get red lines off of this object, dark lines off of this part, and then bright lines off of the highlights. It creates a more interesting visual effect. And looking at that, I might actually just tone this in just a little bit here. Just a little bit more like that. There we go. I'm not a fan of this corner right here. That's better. Okay, so let's add a new material to this. So I'm just going to right click on this, go to assign material, and I have a few different options. I could add a Blinn, Lambert, all of these, but what I'm actually going to add is a surface shader. Now, a surface shader is a very specific type of material that does not get influenced by light. And this is going to be very important. So let's take this surface shader and I'm just going to set its color, use the color picker here and pick the color of the pants for this one, just like that. Done. Now, let's actually show the difference between a normal material and a surface material, surface shader. So this is a default Lambert material here, and we'll do the same thing. I'm going to assign a material, a new Lambert, and I'm going to assign the same color we added for the other one. And you'll notice that depending on my camera angle right here, that material will seem to change color. Sometimes it's going to be darker, like right here, it's much, much darker. Other times it's going to be lighter, like right there. There is no consistent lighting to this. And the reason for this is it's being affected by the lights in the scene. Now in this case it's just the default lights of the scene, but it's still being affected. And to me, I'm not a fan of that, because if I suddenly have to change the angle of this object just a little bit, it might change the color, it might not keep the effect that I want. A surface shader object, or a surface shader material I should say, is pure color. It will only ever show that pure color, and that is it. So a good example of this is if I put that as pure red, it looks pure red. If I take this object and put this as pure red, you can see it's red as long as I'm looking straight at it. As soon as I'm off to the side here, now it's kind of a grayish red. Definitely not as vibrant as this one over here. So whenever I'm doing these lines, I like to use surface shaders. So let's take this one, and based on where it is there, let's add a new surface shader to it. So right click, add favorite material, surface shader, and I'm just going to add maybe the color of the top of the shoe right there. And let's crank that down just a little bit more. There we go. So there we go. Now we've got this quick speed line right there. And I can just keep repeating that process. And might seem a little slow and tedious here, but once you get into the swing of things, it goes pretty quick. Now, if you are in a professional setting, there are tools for this. I will say that right away. This is not what they tend to do in studios. Usually, if they're going to have lines like this, they will have special tools built just for this. But for us, just doing this for a demo reel here or there, this doesn't take that long. And the nice thing is, if I needed to reuse them for, let's say, this frame, well, let's just duplicate them and then move these over, maybe rotate them there, maybe make them a little longer, and I can reuse these same lines and just edit their shape a little bit for the very next frame. So you're not stuck. So something like that, and then once again, let's just take both of these, key their visibility, off, on, or sorry, off, there we go. And then this one too. Off, off. So now we've got there. Very quick, very simple. Done. So speed lines are very quick and easy to do. There's really not too much to it. But it really does fill in that gap. Instead of this big pop right now, we're leading the audience's eye. Now, one thing I wouldn't do is exactly what I did here. Pay attention to your spacing. This is very, very important. So let me use my grease pencil tool here. So the leg here, if I watch the spacing of this leg, it goes from there, up, and then down, like that. So this means that my spacing, if I wanted to add a nice movement downwards right here, the spacing should be somewhere around there, and then possibly here, to create a nice effect of that leg coming down, if I was to animate this at a slower speed. So my spacing is going to be like that. My line is going way too high. This is going to create a pop, a visual pop, on top of what I'm getting. So this is actually going to defeat the purpose of what I want. So instead, I need to make sure that this is probably right about there. And watch that spacing and the arc. And suddenly this is going to get an even better effect. Same thing with the shoe. Now the shoe, since it's so much higher, I could actually maybe stretch this one out. So I'm inversing what I had. So something like that. And let's hide this. So this is going to give a better effect of a smear. And then the same thing here, like the leg there, you'll notice that the line is going past. I don't want that. Should be a little bit smaller, more like that. And then the curve would have to be different too. But just pay attention to those elements. It's going to be very important in taking that effect and bringing it to that next level. So it's not just a random effect going in, but a very clear, conscious effect that is aiding your animation. So just watch out for that. So we've got speed lines. Great. So let's go to our document. So we've got lines, check. What is next? Let's do a smear. Now a smear, let's see. Trying to think of, yeah, let's do smears. Smears are an interesting thing because there's a few different ways we can do them. There is a rig way. So let's go through here and we'll do this on another step. So this one here maybe. So let's say we want this leg over here to come down and just swoop through and smear across the screen downwards into the next one. So what we're literally trying to create, or technically it would be this one. So we've got the leg position right here, and then there. And what we're trying to do is smear the leg coming down there. So we could do speed lines, same thing, but we want to add a smear. We want just this kind of geometry look to it. There's a few different ways we can do this. So the first way, and this is the easier way that works on pretty much any rig, is that we basically do the same thing that we just did with the speed lines. We create geometry and smear it. So I tend to kind of favor spheres for this. And I'll do this very roughly here because I don't want to spend too much time on this. But I can take a sphere, position it roughly around where this leg is. So something like that. And then in Maya, I can go to my sculpt tools, which is under mesh tools. And I'm just going to activate the let's see, I haven't used this in a while. The grab tool, I believe. And what I can do is just smear this sphere into the shape I want. So something like this. Kind of create this effect right there. So let's say we want something like this. Now, the nice thing is with this, you can then smooth things out, make sure it's not too rough and horrible. So, like so. And then I'm just going to take the object and soften it up by hitting the 3 key. So with that, I've created a smear of sorts. And once again, I can simply apply a material that matches the color of his pants. And this will get me, let's see, if I think I could apply Lambert 2, I think. Oh, that one's red still. Boop, boop, and pants. There we go. So that gets me a very similar effect. Now, does it look great? Not terribly. But keep in mind, this will show for 1 frame. As long as it's close enough, that's all you need. And you can do this with the face. So if the face is turning super quick, you can just add some geometry to it to make it look like it's being pulled across, and smearing. And the benefit with this compared to using something like just a polygon plane is that since it's a 3D object, there's more mass to it, you can actually shape it into a few more interesting shapes. So you get that benefit to it. But as you can see, it's very, very simple. There's not much to it. Now, for this, I would definitely spend more time. For example, I wouldn't have it connect to the ankle here because that definitely gives it away. I would try to maybe move it up there a little higher so it doesn't connect to the leg, but that could help. Now the other way you can do this is with the rig. So with the rig, let me just get rid of this for now. With the rig, if your rig has it, you can use the extra controls to distort the rig. So in this case, for example, let's say I wanted to drag the leg up a little bit more on this frame. Well, with this rig, it actually comes with what are called bend bows. And bend bows, or shaper controls, are controls that you can actually use to shape the rig. So with this, I can pretty much just drag this leg back way up like that, and let's push it even more. So the foot here is up there. Let's bring this back way up here. So this looks broken right now, but then I can use the bend bows to arc this leg, and the big thing with these is it's gonna look weird for a little bit, so you just have to kind of go with it and really just commit. It's oftentimes very horrifying, but now you've got, and I should have keyed these. Always make sure you key your sculpting controls. So let's key those there, key them there, and then there. And then I'm just going to zero them out right here. So, not the scale. There we go, zeroed out there, and then zeroed out here. So now we've got that. A smear. Now at speed, you're not even going to see that. It's just going to feel like one part is delaying the foot here so that the spacing works a little bit better, and the rest of the leg is leading. So we're smearing it. That's it. Now this rig is really powerful because you've got that in the head as well, so I can just like really smear the forehead or the chin as much as I want. But that would be one way of doing that. So there we go. Now there is another way of doing this, and Canestia, thank you so much for the subscription. That's awesome. 5 months in a row. Jeez, thank you so much. Oh, his leg does look broken. Thank you so much. There is another way to do this, which I tend to prefer, but in order to show the way to do it, I'm first going to show how to do multiples, because it's taking the multiple concept and then just turning it into a smear instead of just leaving it as a multiple. Let's see, you can use the scale gizmo even if it was for one frame like you did. Do you mean like right here? Just scaling the leg or distorting the leg? You can definitely do that for just one frame. And a lot of these blurs, smears, and whatnot, they're usually a one frame trick. You don't usually see them for more than 1 or 2 frames, maybe 3. As soon as it goes longer than that, 4 frames, it's starting to push it to be something that you see instead of just feel. You usually want to feel these. Not all the time. For example, in the Coyote Falls clip here, this is held for a lot longer. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and then finally here. So they're using that stylistically in this case. In the Spider-Verse, these effects will only usually hold for 2 frames. So you can see here, speed line 1, 2, and then they're gone. They're actually reversed into these speed lines. So they don't just kind of hold that one spot. This multiple only holds for 1 frame right there. This multiple over here, 1, gone. Even though this shot is on 2s, they only hold the multiple for 1 frame. Because multiples, especially multiples, if we see them for too long, it looks fake. With speed lines, it's a little different because they're so simple, but multiples and smears will usually be held for a very short amount of times. So let's go into creating an actual multiple. So let's go into the next step over here in this poor leg. Let's see. I'm actually going to... How do I want to do this? Let's try to fix his knee right here. Okay. There we go. So we've got this next step here. Let's say I want to create multiples on this one. Well, how do I do that? How do I take this character and give him extra limbs? Pretty much. That's what I'm trying to do. And there's a lot of different ways you can do this. Some people tend to bring in extra copies of the rig. That way they can just put extra limbs and turn the visibility on different copies whenever they need. For me personally, I don't like that because it slows down your scene, especially if you're already dealing with a scene with lots of rigs. It can be super hectic. So instead, what I like to do is simply duplicate the geometry. And when you're doing this, it's going to be, at least for me, I try to do it in a very specific process so that I can get exactly the results I need with very little work and having to rework things. Because as soon as you're dealing with multiples, it can be very tricky because you're dealing with more things. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to figure out my spacing and my arcs. Because once I know that, those are going to be the rest is just filling in the gaps. So let's take a look at the spacing here. Let's make a new layer. And yeah, exactly. Duplicating the geo is much lighter on the scene. Exactly. You want to try to keep things light if you can. So let's take a look at our spacing here. And this is what we've got right through here. And this is not the most clear, but hopefully you guys can see that. So with this, we've got one pose from there to there, and then all the way down here. So let's try to add some multiples. I'll need probably a multiple on frame 14. So I'm just going to add an M here. So there's going to be a multiple here. And then probably 2 multiples on frame 15. At least. X2. Okay. So where do I put this? Well, pretty much I plan out my spacing. So the foot is changing course. So it's going to have to ease out up here and then arc downwards. So I can probably put a multiple right there or maybe right here if I'm just looking at my spacing. Now as the foot comes down, that spacing is going to get faster, and then probably there and then down. So those give me my positions for the spacing. I'm just looking at, and actually I won't even do this because that's going to ease in right there. So let's actually make sure I've got the right key. Okay, so there, watch my spacing is getting bigger, and then biggest is when he hits the ground right there. So I'm just thinking of the spacing chart, and pretty much what I'm doing is an ease out from the top. It eases out, gets faster, faster, and then the fastest point is right here. That's it. So with this, let's make the multiples. So the way I do this is very simply get the leg into position where you want it to be on one of the frames. So let's say this is good. It's in that position right there where my spacing is. And I'm going to select, let me actually turn off the bend bows here just so I don't accidentally select those. So I'm going to select the foot and shoe geometry here and the leg. And I'm just going to hit Control D to duplicate it. Now, there is a problem with this. So I've duplicated it, and you can see, haha, I've got another copy of the character, and he's just been stabbed through the head. I should have moved it in the other axis. That's better. Less gruesome. So I've got an extra copy of this character. Now there's a problem here. The first one, or a few problems actually. The first one being, this geometry, if we look in the outliner, is still in the rig. This is going to make it very hard to tweak later on if I need to make some changes. I don't like that. I do not like keeping extra geometry and multiples that I'm working on hidden within the hierarchy of a rig. Now, to pull these out can be a little bit of a pain to do it manually. So what I like to do is make sure nothing is selected. It's absolutely nothing selected, and hit Control G on your keyboard. This is going to create a group. But since nothing is selected, it'll just create a null object. So Control G, that's the same as going to edit group right there. But since nothing was selected, it created an empty group, a null object. And with this, I'm just going to call this multiples. Now I'm going to make a quick hierarchy here. So this is going to be multiples. Let's create another null object and place that within the multiples layer. Now I've got multiples and then null object 1, which I will call frame 14, F14. So with all of this, I will now select my geometry right there, select group or F14 here, and hit P on my keyboard to parent. That takes all of that geometry and places it in F14, so frame 14. Now, all of a sudden, all of that information is right there where I need it. Okay, so why else is this hierarchy very important? Well, one, it's going to make turning things on and off a lot easier. So I can just take frame 14 here, this actual group here, key its visibility, off there, off on the next frame, and there we go. Suddenly, instead of having to key every single object, and if you're doing a multiple that has a character with a glove and rings and all of this geometry that you're duplicating, having to animate every single item can be a huge pain. One group is way easier. So I can take this, okay, perfect. Now all I need to do here is position, all I have to do here is get rid of all the parts of the character that I don't need. So what I mean by this is, I don't want a multiple of his arms and his head and all of that. I just want his left leg. So what I'm going to do, oops, and let's now move my shot camera here. There we go. Let's actually lock that in case I forget again. So I'm going to take my, let's get our spacing back here. I'm going to take the geometry here, and I'm just going to get rid of all the pieces I don't want. So I just want this leg. So I'm going to select faces here, and let's select the edge loop right along there and hit delete. So this is the way I like to delete parts of the rig for multiples. Just delete one edge loop, like that. It deleted all the way around that pant leg. Now all I need to do is double click on the part I want to get rid of. That'll select all that geometry that is contiguous, that is one piece. And I can hit delete, and I got rid of that. Done. Let's get rid of this as well. Now let's do this with the body as well. This poor nude man. So I'm just going to select the edge loop right here. So if you're curious on how to select an edge loop, just select one face, hold down shift, double click on the next face next to it. And that'll just select the entire edge loop, hit delete, double click, delete. Done. So now I've just got a leg, which is kind of creepy looking. And right now it's kind of out of place, but because I duplicated it in its original position, if I select all of these, I can just zero out the translations, and it puts the leg right back where it should be. Okay, great. Well, we've got a duplicate of the leg, but nothing's really happening here. Well, all I need to do is take the actual rig now and move that leg up, paying attention to my spacing. This is why I tracked my spacing in the first place and my arcs, and right there. So now we've got the leg coming up and then down. Now, let's see, this frame here is gonna have to be a little lower. Oh, I know what's going on. My loop is a little off, so give me 1 second here. I'm just going to bake out the animation on this character here. Or technically, I think I can just bake out the animation on this. I'll do the whole leg. So the reason I'm having to bake out here is just because I'm dealing with a cycle. If you're dealing with just a normal shot, you're not gonna have to worry about this, so don't worry. Let's just do 40 frames. So I'm just going to go to edit, keys, bake simulation. Let's do a smart bake, time slider, and apply. And hopefully this won't mess up the rest of my shot. That knee. Okay. Okay, cool. Perfect. Except for there. But that's fine. That's outside of my range. So I'm actually going to stop my shot here at frame 16. That way we don't have to worry about that. Aha! Hey, Mamaruk, how's it going? So, let's go back to frame 14 here. And once again, take this leg and just bring it up right to where it was. So there we go. Now we've got that leg come down and we've got a multiple. Done. Let's do the next pose. So that's going to be on frame 15. So once again, all we need to do is to duplicate the geometry. So I'm going to try to keep the leg in this position for the actual rig frame. When I'm dealing with multiples, the frame that I want the rig to be, or let me put this way. The frame that I want to not be a duplicate, that I want to actually be the rig, is going to be the most important frame. So in this case, it's the foot on the ground contacting. That is the most important frame because it's the contact. It's the extreme. The other two are just in-betweens. So I'm going to try to keep this as my main leg. So there's a few different ways you can do this. If you're animating this ahead of time, and this is where, like we had talked about earlier, you want to add multiples early in the process or early-ish, because if you wait until the polish phase, you're going to run into issues like this where you're going to have to kind of backtrack a little. But all I really need to do is take this leg and I'm going to buffer the curve. And this is just going to allow me to reset the leg back into this position once I make the multiples. So let's take this ankle here and move it forward. So right there. And actually probably a little bit more in. Again, this is where those arcs come in handy. And planning out your spacing. So make sure that that's in the correct position right there. Let's duplicate the geometry. So just take all that, Control D, and let's move it over to the side right there. And then move the leg into the next position, which can be right about probably about there. And I should be posing out the whole leg, the ankle and everything. I'm not going to worry about that here. Maybe about there actually. So, yeah, so right there. Let's select everything again, Control D. And now I'm just going to take this leg control and swap my buffer. So this gets that leg back into its default position right there that I had before. And actually it looks like it's a little off for some reason. So I can just reposition it. Yep. Or actually, easier. Find the previous frame right there. And then just copy that over to frame. Go from frame 5 to frame 15. Dip. That's better. Okay. So, I've got my duplicates here. So weird looking. It's like I have a mannequin factory, which is very creepy. Playing Sinking City, decided to hop in. Awesome! I haven't heard of that game. Hopefully it's fun. So I've got my multiples here. So let's create a new empty group here. So I'm just going to... Well, actually, let's do it this way. Let's just select all my multiples and hit Control-G to create a group. And with this, now that I have the group selected, I'm going to also select multiples and hit P to parent that group into the multiples. So now I just grab that and put it in there. And let's call this frame 15. Once again, very quickly, let's key this. Visibility keyed on frame 15, off on frame 14, off on frame 16. So now we've got that. Well, now all we have to do is get rid of the extra geometry. So let's quickly get rid of the base geometry, and then we can refine it later. So I'm going to get rid of that. This poor nude man once again. Get rid of this. There we go, and then make sure I get rid of that cuff, the leg there. Oops. Faces, delete. There we go. So that's one leg. Let's put that back into position. Whip. It's a VR game. That's awesome. And the Lovecraft game. Oh, that's so cool. Oh, it's not a VR game? Aw, dang it. I love Lovecraftian lore. I've never really read any of the books, but I love Arkham Horror, the board game. So let's do the same thing here. Get rid of this. Get rid of this. Get rid of the cuff. And then let's get rid of the body here. Well, that's a phrase I never actually thought I'd say. The joy of being an animator. You say things that are just so strange sometimes. Okay, so we've got the legs in position here. Perfect, and let's take off our spacing there. So with this, we've got our multiples. Now at this point, what I can do is kind of tweak the shape of the multiples in a sense of it doesn't have to be the whole leg. Kind of like how when I was doing the, let's find them here, the speed lines right there, I kind of narrowed them at the tip and then made them wider at the bottom. This kind of adds more weight, more motion to the to that object. Well, what I can do here is do a very similar thing. So let's maybe take this top leg and let's see, how do I want to do this? Maybe I'll just take right below the knee here. So let's take that, delete the rest. Same thing with the leg here. Delete that. And then for the next one, let's just grab, let's see, maybe right there above the knee. Yeah. That should work. And then same thing with the leg, right there. There we go. So now it's a little bit more stylized. Instead of just being these solid pieces of leg, now we've got this kind of fading off effect. It's very subtle, but when played at speed, it's not going to just feel like copies of a leg. It's going to feel like an effect, like a blur coming through. And I can even do it for this leg too, if I wanted to. So maybe instead of all of that, let's get maybe a little bit more there. So something like that. And now we've got multiples. And at speed, it's just going to look nice and clean. But the big thing is watching your arcs, watching your spacing. Now, like I was saying, in terms of smears, you can mix and match all of these. Yeah, exactly. You can mix and match. So if I wanted to, I could add some speed lines to this. So I'm going to just do this very quickly with my grease pencil tool here. So for example, I could add maybe just like a few little quick lines there. Let's see if I can make this a little bit smaller. Okay. So just a few quick lines right in there. So add some speed lines to that. And additionally, I could take the objects here, and let's see if I can do a whole group together. That would be cool if I can. And I'm going to go to my mesh tools, sculpting tools, and let's hit that grab tool. Okay. And okay, so it'll grab all the different parts. Darn. But I could start to sculpt these a little bit as well. So maybe like drag that, that, and that. Like so. So start to smear these objects. Now actually, here, let's do this properly. So let's say you've got this and they're not deforming together. If you want them to deform together, select these objects, go to mesh, and then combine. That'll make them into one object. And then from there, I should be able to use the grab tool, hopefully. Ah, dang it. It's using each tool separately. Let's see if I can grab silhouette, maybe? No. Fall off. There we go. So it was set to fall off based on the surface. Because they are different surfaces, it was causing it to only affect the one. If I set this to volume only, now it'll select everything regardless. So now I can shape these, and there we go. Now we can really get a nice smear in there, along with the multiples. And is there a lattice tool you could use? You can use a lattice tool. I'm not a fan of using the lattice tool with animation for the simple reason that it's very finicky. And when you're dealing with an animated object coming in and out of the lattice, it can create some weird effects. Now, if you do want to experiment with that, it is possible. So, for example, let's see if I want to... Where would they do this here? Got the smear right there. Oh, and looks like I'm going to have to put this back into the frame 15 group. There we go. Haha. Because I combined them, it took it out of the group. Okay. Let's do this kick forward here. So maybe we want to blur this leg. Where did you select the grab tool from? The grab tool can be found under Mesh, Sculpting Tools, and then Grab Tool right there. This should be in Maya 2018 and 2019. I don't know if it's in 2017. Now for a lattice, let's select the mesh. Now I will say this right away. I don't like editing the base rig lattice or the rig mesh. I'm not comfortable with that typically, unless I'm very sure that it's not going to break anything, because you never know when one of Maya's tools is going to break something in the history or just cause issues. But let's say, for example, I want to do this. So what I can do is go to Deform and go to Lattice. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all the faces that I want to affect here. So let's take the shoe, the body, and the pants. And I'm going to select, let's say, all of this. Nope. Maya's frozen here. This is one of the reasons why I don't like editing the base mesh, is because it can be very slow depending on the rig. So there we go. So let's say I want to affect all of these. Wait for it. I shouldn't have tried to deselect things. There we go. So let's go to Deform, Lattice, and let's just apply the default lattice here. There we go. So what this is going to do is give me a tool that lets me deform the geometry. So let's select these lattice points and just kind of bring these down and stretch that foot. And you'll notice that with this, I can start to create a smear frame right through here. So like that. Now, the problem with the lattice tool, and it's what you have to be careful of, is if you then adjust the rig, so let's select the leg here, and move it in or out of that lattice, you'll notice you get some really weird effects. So be very careful with it. I would only use this on one frame at a time and try not to animate the lattice. It's very hard to get it to work correctly. So let's say I want this smear here. So he kicks like that. So what I would do with the lattice, you can easily break the legs like that too, is there is this envelope attribute right here. This basically turns the lattice on and off, right there. So what I can do is I can key this envelope, and on the frame I want the smear to happen, there it is. Frame 10, I'll turn that off. Frame 12, I'll turn that off. And the big reason that this is important is if that character was still running forward, in this case he's running in place, but if he was to run forward into a currently active lattice, you can see his leg, it's hard to see right there, but his leg is, well, there you go, it's being deformed. And this would be on the wrong frame. There's no smear that's supposed to happen on this frame. So treat it like any of the other smears. You turn it on and off when you need. So now, because this envelope is off here, I can move this character and it's not going to deform in the next frame. I only have that smear right in there. Let's see if I can maybe push this lattice point a little bit more here, just to kind of push that arc like that. So right up. So that would be another way to do it. And for me personally, I don't like using the lattice. I've had issues with certain rigs where it broke, so I kind of fell out of using them. I kind of prefer to use the grab tool. The other thing with the grab tool that I find is, even though it's a little bit more work, it creates nicer results a lot of the time. Like right here, you can see that foot is really harsh and jagged. Whereas with this, I get this really nice smooth deformation right in there. So I find it's just a little bit more flexible a lot of times. But any of these are good resources. It's not like one is going to be way better than the other or the ideal. It's whatever works for a specific scenario. But you can see with all of this, we've created a lot of different effects that give a unique flair to this animation. Now, in this case, they're all happening at random times and whatnot. Not very nice looking. But if you were to stick with a style or a consistent feeling to the effects, this would add a lot to a shot. For me personally, I really like the speed blurs or the lines, as well as multiples. Smears work very well as well, but you do have to be very careful with them, especially when you're in CG working with a rig. Things like faces and stuff can be very hard to smear naturally. But yeah. Hopefully that made sense. Hopefully it works out. I will say this is my least favorite. I do not like doing this unless it's for a very specific scenario. Usually bending the limbs in this way, it'll create a smear effect, but it just looks broken. It looks meh. I'm not a fan of this look. I would prefer to do a multiple or a smear for that. A proper smear. So this I would usually use for if you're doing a really quick action, and it's basically the equivalent of breaking a joint. So for example, if you're going to have someone throw something really quick or maybe raise their arm, you could actually break the elbow on one frame and add more drag. That could work, but it would have to be very, very specific. For a general smear, this does not work too well. So with that, let me double check if I missed any questions. Can you just make one leg and just duplicate the leg for the rest of the multiples? Yes, you can. So you can definitely just duplicate whatever you've already duplicated. So for example, let's go right here. I could just take all of these, duplicate that, and then reposition that. The reason I like to duplicate the whole rig, typically, is in this case, I just moved the leg, just the upper leg, which worked fine. That's good. But if you're doing a proper multiple, you're going to want to pose out everything. So in this case, the knee and the ankle would have a slight tweak in them. Or in the case of this, how each pose, and Antifreeze, thank you so much for the follow. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. In this case, you'll see that every arm is a different pose. So you would pose out the rig itself and then duplicate it and then move on. If you try to do this, if you just take one arm and then duplicate, you've just got the one pose, and then you'd have to try and pose out that hand without any of the rig controls, which is a nightmare to have to deal with. So I would say in general, duplicate the rig, but for those simple situations, like the one I did here where it's just quick leg poses, yeah, you don't have to worry about duplicating the whole rig each time. It's definitely much faster this way. The one thing I would do is, you'll notice that my pivot point is way off here. Once you duplicate it, just go to all the body parts, group them together, and then center the pivot point. And this will just make it a little easier to pose out. I could even maybe move the pivot point to kind of the knee area and whoop, there we go. That'll just make it much easier to get in the right orientation. So something like that. Oh, I'm glad you like the demo. Smear frames and multiples are one of those things that I really love. They add so much when you use them in the right places. How did you move the pivot like that again? It's just holding down the D key. D is in delta. If you hold down the D key on any object, this will activate the pivot tool. So, for example, I'm just going to create a cube. It'll be easier to show on this. If I wanted the pivot point to be on the right side here, so instead of rotating from the center, it rotates from the side. Hold down the D key, and I can just move that over to the side, and now it rotates from there. If you want it to be a specific point, one thing I like to do is snap pivots. So let's say I want to rotate this like a pirate treasure chest. So let's actually center the pivot here. Oop. Let's say I want to quickly make a pirate treasure chest or a Zelda treasure chest. I'll duplicate the lid, move it up, whip, there we go. So we've got a very simple treasure chest, but by default it rotates in the wrong spot. Now I could position it manually right there, and then okay, yeah, that'll close, but man, I didn't get it quite in the right spot. Not quite right. So when you're moving the pivot point, what you can also do is snap the pivot point. And you can do this by holding down the X, C, or V key. The X key will snap to the grid. You can see that activating the magnet tool up here, right there. The C key will snap to a curve, and the V key will snap to a point. So not only that, you can snap per axis. So whichever axis you currently have selected on your manipulator, whichever one's yellow, is what it's going to snap to. So if I select the middle axis here, all three, that's the yellow box right there, hold down the V key and then middle mouse drag on a corner. So hold down D, then hold down the V key. So you've got both the D and the V, Delta and Victor, held down. Middle mouse drag on the corner, boop, it's right there. And all three axes. If I want to just do it in one, hold down the D key, hold down the V key, I'll select the Y axis right there, then middle mouse drag there. Now it just snapped it straight up. So with this, I can just snap it very quickly down to this edge, then snap the whole object down, and whip. Perfect. Lid opens at exactly the right pivot point. Done. Without having to try and manually position things. So I really love the D and XCV keys, hotkeys. And when are the right and wrong times to use smears? So I actually did a whole talk before doing the actual demo here on smears and when and where to use them. But really they are a way to, and this is just for anyone who's joined in here, smear frames are a way for animators to direct the human eye in a way or in situations where movement is too fast. So a good example of this is, let's say you've got two objects, or this ball going from frame 1 here and then frame 3 over there. If we just go frame 2 right here, so this is frame 2, what'll end up happening is we'll end up with a pop because there's nothing over here. So the audience's eye will go from frame 1 over here to frame 2 over there, and then it'll continue in that line because we've shown that indication of motion, but it's going to maybe be about here on frame 3 instead of way over here. And suddenly the audience's eye is going to miss what happens and then have to jump over. It's a pop, a snap. We want to avoid that kind of effect. So what a smear, a multiple, a motion blur, all of these different things, they are all for the same purpose of connecting that gap, of bridging the gap, so that our eyes create a fluid line from all of these elements. Additionally, multiples have the added advantage of allowing us to show hectic motion. We can pretty much show two or multiple frames on one frame, multiple keys on one frame. So that can be very, very useful. Let's see. Yeah, the insert button toggles the pivot point. Exactly. That's a good point. I got used to not using the insert key because I had a laptop for a while that didn't have it. But you can use the insert key to activate pivot point mode as well. So in the Student Showcase 2018 at 201, Tony Dario shows a great example of smearing for a fight scene. Yes, Tony Dario is amazing. Another awesome shot is, oh, now I can't remember the animation showcase it was. But it was Nick Kondo. He actually worked on the Spider-Verse. He did a shot of a guy crossing the street. Oh, Nick Kondo's is right before Tony's? Awesome. Perfect. So that one as well, if it's the one I'm thinking of, him crossing the street, that's another awesome use of smear frames. And I believe the way he did that was just using the grease pencil tool or bringing it into something like Krita to draw over it. There was no fancy plugin or anything for that. Photoshop, was it? Nice. So yeah, you just bring it into a quick editing program so you can draw over it and done. So all of these effects are very useful to have in your toolkit as an animator. They will be extremely helpful in pushing those moments. They don't happen a lot. It's not like this is something that is going to be in every scene you ever animate. Not really. Even in something as awesomely complex as Into the Spider-Verse here, where you can see multiples. There's not 3 toothpicks here, it's just the one. You can see he spits it out and then it bounces off the camera right there, and then multiples right there, or the baseball bat right here. There's definitely multiples and smear frames, and let's go back just a little bit here. Like, look at that. This is another, it's similar to the speed lines. This is the anime effect I was talking about. How instead of doing separate lines like this, they're taking off of the surface. So you just take the surface here and you're pulling off of it a little bit. That creates a really neat effect. So you've got things like that. Let's see, right there, more speed lines, all sorts of different things. They use them to create silhouettes as well, which is a really cool effect. But not every scene has that. Let's just kind of randomly skip to a frame here and reset that range. Let's see. Oh, for some reason it froze on me. There we go. I have too many clips open, I think. Let's see. There we go. So if we go just randomly here, there's this great animation, but they're not using these effects on every single scene. They use it in specific moments to amplify certain effects. Even here, like this is a fast motion, he's jumping right there, but there's no speed lines, no multiples, no smears. It's going for clarity. Such a great little effect right here, the way his weight goes past there and then back up. Really nice. But it is an addition. It doesn't always have to be there. and this is the big thing with a lot of new animators, is when they start learning these effects, they'll start to add them in everywhere. Even a little motion, there's going to be a smear frame or a multiple or something. It doesn't need it. Save them for the big moments. And that's what's really going to help sell that moment, instead of making everything feel monotonous. If you use it all the time, it just becomes monotonous. So I hope this demo was helpful. If anyone has questions on that, definitely let me know. If not, I might call it here, simply because I don't have too much else to talk about today, and I do want to get that bee out of my house and back into the outdoors. I feel sorry for that poor thing, especially after I accidentally hit it when I was waving my hand. Yeah, I hope this was helpful. Now, if anyone does have demo requests, so this was a requested demo that I got, and hopefully it was helpful. But if anyone else has questions about this, and we can definitely see a play blast, it's going to look weird because every step is so different. But if anyone has demo requests, if you want to see a specific style of animation, if you want to see a specific type of shot done, if you want to see something like this, an explanation of a specific animation topic, always feel free to let me know, and I'd be happy to prep a demo for you. That's really what these streams are all about, is trying to give everyone a place to ask questions. See, I'm just going through here, and I want to make sure I have a clean cycle. So from frame 5 to frame, I think if I do 6 to 16, it should give me a clean cycle. Or 6 to 15, I should say. Yeah. And then I'll loop it. Okay. And let's make sure I only have the correct layers on here. Oops, not that one, this one, I think. Yeah. Okay. Get everything ready for the play blast. And let's just save this on my desktop. And we'll see. Melee was so much good. And Daniel, hello! So this is what we get. And you can see a lot of it you don't really see. It just kind of comes up. Now I noticed that I didn't make sure that the grease pencil actually turns off, so it just kind of stays there. It looks like a smudge. So I'll have to turn that off there. Let me do a quick, whoop, just turn that off instead of trying to fix it. And we'll take a look. Okay, so there we go. You can see it's very hard to actually see that split frame, that exact frame where all of these turn on. Now, there are a lot of effects here going on, which is making it not read correctly. This is where you want to be very careful how you use these effects. But it's basically helping to draw the eye so that we're not just getting random pops. That's really the key of this. And in this case, it's helped even more because if we look at the legs, we're definitely going to notice these effects. But we're not looking at the legs in this scene. We're looking at his face. That's if this was if this shot came in, as humans, our first inclination is to look at character in the face and the eyes. So we're going to be looking at him, his eyes as he's running, and our eyes won't be pulled down to the feet because there's not going to be a pop. It'll feel like smooth motion as we're looking up on the upper half of him. So that's kind of the key here, is it doesn't have to look perfect when you actually stare at it and break down and try to see them, but when you're looking at it casually, it's going to read well. So definitely add these to your arsenal. I would highly recommend playing around with this. Just do a simple scene like this, a simple run, some sort of just crazy fast movement, or just like a character going whoa, like that, just a big wave, or a punch, or some sort of quick movement. 12 frames, it doesn't have to be very long, and do a test of each effect. And what I would do is, instead of doing what I did here, where I just added all of them on different frames, do 3 copies of that same thing. So you do a quick animation, then do one with smears, one with multiples, one with blur, and one with speed lines. And then see what each one feels like. And that's going to basically help cement in your brain and in your technique which one to use when. Because you're going to learn, oh yeah, speed lines make things feel faster. Multiples make things feel a little bit more cartoony. Smears make things feel a little bit more I'm trying to think of a good word for this, but basically it makes it feel full. Where a speed line, like, you're getting very little detail and it's very slight. So for example, let's go through here, like right here, there's only 2 quick lines that are drawing our eye. A smear like this, it's filling the screen with more geometry and more space. So instead of just feeling like a quick motion, just a fast little thing, it's going to be more mass to it. So it feels heavier, which is great if you're doing a full body character. So a good example of this, just one last example here. Let me see if I can find it quick. Oh, it must be on. I've got too many movies that I whenever I get a new DVD or Blu-ray, I always put it on my computer, and at this point I've got too many. But it does make it fun to analyze. So this is one of my favorite scenes to look at in terms of smears, and this was one of the very first scenes when I was learning animation that I studied for smears. Was in Aladdin. Let's see. So many great scenes in this. Look at that. Oh, look at that. Look at that multiple. He does not have 4 noses normally. And I just love... I always forget his name. I remember it starts with an R. And that is Jim Cummings' voice. Okay, so it's right here. So we've got Aladdin here. And he has to get from one side of the screen to the other super quick. So instead of just having him pitter-patter across the screen, the animator did this. So he basically crosses the screen in 3 frames. 1, 2, 3, and then he's up and over. And you just get this really big smear. He has no bones anymore. And then up and over. And there we go. So, really great scene to analyze. And once again, I would just recommend you guys analyze as many films as you can. If you see something in a film that you just see and you go, man, that was well done, look at it, analyze it. I did the same thing just this morning. I was watching Moana last night. I just randomly put it on and I ended up watching the whole thing. And there were so many scenes that I was just watching and I went, oh man, that feels so good. The weight in the character, the way they turned, the way they did so and so. It looks amazing. So this morning I went through and I just quickly took a look at those few scenes that I could remember and analyzed what made it feel good. What made it feel so interesting. And that is a fantastic way of learning, because you are literally learning from the masters, the the people we admire and the people we want to be, and we want to work in those studios and do these things. Well, learn what made it so awesome, especially if your aim is a specific studio. If you want to work at Sony and work on the next Spider-Verse, study what made Spider-Verse work and see if you can recreate it. Don't copy it, recreate it in your own demo reel. Recreate that feeling. Not that specific scene, but just that feeling that you get when watching it. That's going to get you a solid demo reel and help you get to that specific studio that you're aiming for, versus just random shots that have no connection. I hope all of this was helpful. And like I said earlier, if you do have demo requests, if you do have anything that you would like to see in these streams, definitely let me know. Even if you have animation ideas, something you'd like to see me try to animate, let me know and I'd be happy to prep a stream for you. So with that, I'll have to get going. So take care, everyone. Best of luck, and let's go full screen for this. Best of luck if you're an animation mentor. Best of luck on your assignments. If you're not an animation mentor, best of luck on all of your projects. And I'll see you around. Bye.